Perrotta, host of Sip and SOMA. Welcome to the video series. I'm so excited because today I'm talking to Sasha McDowell about the mental load, which is a really important topic. Sasha is a coach, facilitator, and consultant, and she is the founder of Epicycle Group, which helps parents succeed in work and at home. And I'm so thrilled to talk to you today.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to
Thank
be
you.
here.
Yeah. So basically, we've been talking for years. Sasha also lives in SOMA, and we've been talking about the mental load. And what I love about what you do is that you actually define it for people, and you help them have conversations. So let's define it. Some people are so knowledgeable about it, thinking about it, talking about it, and others aren't. So what is the mental load?
Yeah, so a lot of people are not familiar with the term. It is basically all of the thinking and planning and remembering and keeping track that goes into running a home. And so it keeps everything moving in the domestic sphere, but it's also invisible work. It's not visible like you would be if you were a manager in an organization. And it is a management role. And so because it's invisible, of course it's unpaid, and it's not really recognized as real work or something that takes a skill set to keep things moving.
This is really a new term in our vernacular over the last couple of years. And I first heard about it in a cartoon, which I thought was just so brilliant. It was by this woman, Emma, and it's been spread around the internet. I still see it spread around. And people, it really started a conversation. I love how you talk about how it's invisible and unrecognized. So let's talk a little bit more about that. We know that we've seen articles that say, oh, if a stay-at-home mom was to get paid, her value would be $180,000, right?
Yeah, a lot of money.
It's amazing. And then I think about myself and other moms who are not stay-at-home but still doing a lot of the mental load stuff. So how come it's invisible? How come it's unrecognized? Like, what got us here?
Yeah, well, it's an issue that's existed for a long time. It's been called, sort of in the past, the second shift. And so it really came out of dual earning couples, that if both people are putting in a 9-to-5 day, that typically in heterosexual couples, the woman is coming home and she's doing a second shift. She's doing all of the sort of day-to-day domestic work, laundry, dishes, all of that, but she's also doing thinking and planning for the kids, signing up for extracurriculars. You're about to outgrow your boots, got to get the birthday invitations out. And so the mental load is a newer term to describe it. I think your question was, why is it invisible?
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's invisible because it's in the domestic sphere, right? So when roles are public, at work, people get titles, people get pay, people get promotions, and I think that what we see in the public sphere, we really value, but what happens behind closed doors, it's easy to not think about it so much.
Yeah, that's really good. So I feel like there's a real push now to create equity in a way that I feel for a long time we would talk about equity, talk about equitable pay, we talk about just getting the same opportunities at work and things like that. How does the mental load impact, and also, well, there's lots of different dimensions to it that we've talked about. So one of the things we talked about was emotional labor.
Yes.
And we talked about the impact of the mental load on a woman's ability to make strides in her career. So could you tell a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. So emotional labor is sort of one facet of the mental load, and the idea is that certainly there's all of the regular tasks of running a home, but then there's also some really emotionally charged, more sensitive tasks, like supporting a child in the home who might have a learning challenge or a health challenge, and that for, in particular, women, and it's not always women, sometimes it's men, but because it disproportionately impacts women, I'll be saying women for most of our conversation, that when that particular mother is managing something sensitive, she can feel alone, not only with the amount of work she has to do on the task, but also just with the emotional heaviness of that, and that kind of emotional labor, feeling alone in that, can build resentment faster in a marriage than some of the other work can.
So that leads me to, we also, so that's the emotional part, and already we're starting to talk about dissonance in couples and dissonance in partnerships. And I know that that's what you work on, and I'd love to talk about that, but before we get there, what's the financial impact of the mental load? Because I think that we like I think about how my life has changed, my job has changed, and I've changed it to adapt to what my children's needs are.
Right.
So when you say that, like when you say that there are all these impacts, I think about all the decisions I've made that were kind of based on the mental load.
Right.
And to be very candid, my reading of that cartoon precipitated several conversations in my relationship that were very difficult to have and left me feeling more unrecognized. And this is not to throw shade at my ex-partner or anything like that. I think that it wasn't just him who felt that way. I think there's this sort of mindset about how important is it, the work that I do. I feel like it's really valuable and really important to plan a birthday party with lots of time in advance because I'm thinking about all the things along the way. You know, I'm thinking about what present is appropriate, what presents do they want. I have to go buy those presents, I have to wrap those presents, having the party, the invitations. I feel like everything I do, I was just showing this before, is like task mastered.
Yes.
So this is my book of projects. Welcome to my world, everybody. It's my book of projects. These post-it notes are like the must-dos of the projects, but every project has its own page. My children have a project page. They are a project. Like, so their birthday parties would go on here. So I have this, and then I transfer my to-do lists into my planner, and then make post-it notes for the daily list of things I have to get done. This is a whole managerial system that is wrapped up with my work and my businesses and my kids, and I felt really proud of doing that, but I felt like it's unpaid. Nobody noticed it. Nobody's like, yeah, you. So it's the invisible, but it also impacts me financially.
Right.
How are other couples struggling with this? What could you say about the economic issues?
Well, the research talks about the impact on women in their careers and professionally is that a lot of their brain space is taken up with a lot of the things that they need to do. So it can mean after a very hectic morning, showing up at work not as focused and ready to really be present there. There was a great article that came out a few months ago about when you add up 5 days a week, Monday through Friday, the hour and a half to 2 hours of work that happens before you even go to work, it's a full day, right? So it means you can show up to work a little tired, a little frazzled, a little less focused. It also means that many women are not doing after work events that would help them gain visibility, get promoted. So networking, professional development. Also anecdotally, I know just in my own journey through this work, I've talked to a lot of moms who have turned down promotions because they don't want to travel and be away from home, things like that. So there is an economic impact on women.
So I think this is really interesting. I work with several families as a tutor. So let's say 11 families a week. And every single family that I work with, I talk to the mom about all of the scheduling, about all of their child's, if dad or the other partner is home, because sometimes I work with same-sex couple partners, I might talk to the other partner, but I usually talk to only one person, and every person is a woman. And then they know all of the things that are going on, and then they're connecting me with the teacher. So I look at the amount of time that I'm just seeing from the people I work with. And then I'm wondering, how does it change? How do you help change? So I know that you coach, you facilitate, you consult. How do we start having conversations where I can get more time, like we all can get more time, or split that mental load a little bit more equitably?
So it's interesting, in any relationship, both people are contributing to the dynamic, right? And so the research sort of talks about in heterosexual couples, men need to stop helping and start owning. So that comic by Emma.
I'm gonna write that down. Stop helping. Start owning.
That comic by Emma, I also remember reading that. It may have been the first time I heard about the mental load. And she does such a great job at showing the mom is running around, running herself ragged, moving between a lot of different tasks. And the dad is sort of like, let me know how I can help. And the helping dynamic is sort of problematic because when I tell you that I'm willing to help you, it implies that you have ownership, which means ultimately you're responsible. Which means from a mental perspective, I'm not really so worried about all the little details, how they connect, what might slip through the cracks. I'm just stepping in to like be your sous chef from time to time, right? But you're the one who's like, I didn't really sleep well last night because I started thinking about all these different things, right?
I'm guilty of that right now.
Yeah.
Birthday party is on the mind.
Yeah.
It's like, how do I make all the pieces fit?
Yeah. So that's sort of what men and straight couples could be working towards. Women, at the same time, I think when women have assumed so much of the responsibility, you're going, it can be hard to let go of control, because as you've carved out your management routine, you have things that are done a certain way, and you want them to continue to be done a certain way. And so you need to let go of that. The person who's going to own the task gets to make the decisions about how things are done.
Right.
And so, letting go of that can be tricky for women, but I know from my own experience, my husband and I also have young kids. We're also navigating this whole phase of life. I've had to ask myself some questions like, do you care that your daughter's pajama shirts are in with her regular shirts? Would you rather spend your time separating the shirts or going to a yoga class? And I'm like, okay, I'm going to yoga. It's not my task anymore. It's not the end of the world if the shirts are mixed together. So there is that stepping back.
I thank you for giving us such a specific example, because I think, and such a small example, because if you take a little example like that, like worrying the way something's done, and multiply it by how many tasks need to get done around the house, and if somebody else starts owning them, giving up the control over all of those things being done. I'm thinking about this because it's a little thing, but if you multiply it, and just sort of let go, it could be really good for your relationship and really good for yourself, it sounds like.
I think it's good for both partners. I think that when one person has all the details and the plan for how that is done, I also think that that's empowering, right? And so I think that some partners want to be doing more, but need ownership. People need ownership over what they're doing.
What I love about the Emma cartoon, and that you and I have talked about, is that the shift was not just like, oh, let's vent, let's complain about the mental load, but it was like, how do we solve the problem?
Right.
So one of the things that was pointed out afterwards is that this is a there is a conditioning, right? This is a model, a gender divide, and it's something that we're constantly working on, and also that it feels like women kind of take the lead on talking about the mental load. The way I think about it, the way to me it becomes really important, is that I sort of break the cycle of being inequitable. Is I want my son to not grow up thinking of himself as a helper. I want him to grow up as thinking of himself as an owner of home management things. So how do you talk to couples around that too, or help couples sort of when maybe there's a little dissonance about sharing? I always say to my kids, it's really important for you to clean up after themselves, but I like everyone in their sphere, men and women, to also make that statement.
So hearing it from men and women.
Hearing it from men and women, I feel like, is the important part. So how do you talk couples through that? Like, these are difficult conversations. What are some of your strategies or tools?
So, just a little bit of context before I answer that. So the reason I brought up the second shift before is just to sort of highlight that this issue has existed for a long time, and it's interesting because a lot of the early writing about the second shift, academics thought that we were already going to have solved this by now, and we haven't, and now we're rolling out a new name to talk about it, right? So to your point, it is gender roles that are we've been socialized in since early in life, and it's subtle, right? Because we're all very familiar with girl empowerment programs and really assertive women, but the gender stuff is subtle. And so they sort of talk about that the mental load dynamic in heterosexual couples begins before they have children, but there's just less to do then. So then children come on the scene, and the amount of work, like your multiplier thing, I love, because the amount of work, it's just exponential, right? So that's when the dynamic where a couple before was like, maybe things are a little bit uneven, but we're fine. It can really create tension for a couple. Right. So I think that it's hard to completely unlearn these things, so I don't think that there's like a quick bullet and then it's fixed. So when I'm doing this work with couples, I really recommend a series of conversations. And we're gonna have a free tool that has some exercises with how you can talk to your partner about the mental load and make a bit of a shift in your relationship. It'll be at the bottom of our video.
Awesome.
And so I really recommend a series of conversations, and I recommend not starting in a specific place. Meaning, I think the final conversation in a series of conversations is often where people want to start, which is, hey, let's redistribute everything and let's just get really clear that you're going to do these things and I'm going to do these things. But I think that without some work around changing the dynamic, it's very easy for you then say to me, you said you were going to do these things before and you haven't done them. So what's going to make it different this time? So I really recommend starting in a much more big picture place, talking about what does this phase of life look like? Did you think that it was going to look like this? You know, what did you envision in your 20s or 30s that having a family was going to look like? Did you think it was going to be this hard? How satisfied do you feel at work? How satisfied do you feel in our marriage? How are you feeling about your friendships? Do you feel like you have enough time for yourself to take care of yourself? I mean, the list of things that are on all of us when we have young families, it's too long. Nobody can do all of those things all the time consistently. Yeah. So I think that it's important for people to understand that it's not a walk in the park for their partner either. And right. Of course, this time of family, there's so much joy, or there can be so much joy, but it's also hard. There's a lot of work. So I think that having some empathy, expressing some gratitude for each other, that is a good place to start. So that's the first exercise in this free tool.
That's great. So it sounds like you're kind of, one of my friends used to joke around that you should have a family meeting with your partner. You should have meetings with your partners, like one-on-one meetings that, and almost like with agendas. Yes. That one is like reconnecting. Yeah. And this sounds like one of those big sort of every 3 month or every 6 month kind of meetings where you're like, hey, where am I here? How do I feel in this role? How do I feel in that role? And I feel like that's amazing advice, because I think that it's the thing that we just kind of sort of can let go because of the to-do list. Right. And I think you're saying, what I'm hearing is that making time to have these like clarifying conversations with your partner about how their life is going with them as the individual is really great.
And I think the way that it works best is, it is hard to make the time, but you make the time for like 6 weeks to have a conversation once a week, every week and a half. You have 4 or 5 conversations. You really get on the same page about this phase of life. You get on the same page about what is the mental load? What does this look like? How is this impacting each of us? Because, you know, men have strong opinions too. Certainly I know many couples in which the woman is the primary breadwinner, but I know a lot of couples where the woman is working part-time, she's owning the mental load, the man is the primary breadwinner, and I know a lot of men in that situation where they feel that they're missing out on something too, right? Yeah. So I think having that empathy as a couple, having a common understanding about the mental load is a real thing, here's how it's playing out for each of us, and then slowly moving towards redistributing tasks. And so I think you sort of do that to jumpstart and get some common language, and then after that, I think ongoing check-ins are necessary, but it doesn't have to be as formal as, you know, every 10 days, anything like that, because now you have a common understanding in your marriage, whereas before you might have been having a lot of frustrations and arguments, but you weren't necessarily building a common understanding, or maybe you weren't a piecemeal way. Every couple's certainly different.
I think that's great, because I have to tell you that I just took the article and was like, let's read this and then let's redistribute. So you're already giving, I wish I had taken that advice. So the tool that you're going to offer below, what else besides the tool? What are some things that you offer to couples besides the tool that can get them some help? And I feel like you're almost like it's a mediation sort of thing, like, because these questions and conversations can be hard to have when I think we come from sort of we become entrenched in our point of view, because we become entrenched in like the habit of our life. If my habits are to just take on the mental load, I'm now we want to get people before they're here, and get people when they're like, I'm starting to just be treading water, so they can have the conversation and not have it from a place of real disconnect. So how do you help couples who to have these conversations?
Yeah, so there's 3 different things that I do. One is a series of facilitated conversations with couples, so they can do that jump start with, I'm a coach and a facilitator, I can do that with them, and then they can certainly do the ongoing conversations on their own or come back from time to time, it's up to them. The second thing is I'm happy to work with partners one-on-one in coaching around the mental load. Sometimes because of busyness, one partner doesn't want to come. Sometimes one partner is really ready to broach this issue and the other isn't, and the partner who is ready still wants some support and a bit of a plan for how to bring some of this into their relationship so there can be one-on-one work. And then I'm also in 2020 going to be doing some workshops just to raise awareness of the mental load, give people a chance to practice some skills that they can bring back into their relationship. So that's how I work with couples and individuals on this.
That sounds great. And I think that what you should all take away from this is that you can go as a couple, but what I love is that you also seem to have sort of coaching for individuals who want to have the conversation, that maybe want to come back to you and keep getting that feedback. And then you also have, I think workshops are great because it gets together people and then you can also practice. And so it's a little bit of sharing like what my situation is and like how I want to have this conversation, but I think the practice could also get us into the situation of being in our partner's shoes or being on the other side of what your point of view is, which I think can be really eye-opening when you have to be forced to be put in their situation and kind of think from a different perspective. So sounds like you're opening up people to have really great conversations and also understand each other's perspectives.
Yeah, I think empathy is key. Nobody wants to own everything. Nobody wants to be the bad person who isn't doing enough, right? So it's sort of, how can you understand each perspective and move a little bit more towards the middle where there's a bit more equity?
That's great. And thank you so much for meeting with me today. At the end of every episode, we always talk about a really quick fire question, which is what's your favorite place to hang out in South Orange or Maplewood? Don't think too hard about it. Just what comes to mind.
Well, I work for myself, so my favorite places to hang out are coffee shops when I don't feel like working from home and I want to get out. And then I run into people like you and I get to just see people in the community and hang out, and I like that.
Yeah, we're so lucky. We literally have amazing coffee shops in every corner of Maplewood and South Orange now, and I think I've seen you at probably 3 or 4.
I know, with great baked goods at all the shops, which is very important.
She brought me a gluten-free scone.
It's true. I did. I was late for our meeting, but I came with scones.
I have no complaints here. Okay, great. And as always, this is the season to be joyful, gratitude, and, feel joy, be grateful. What's something you're really grateful for this year?
Oh, God. I'm grateful for a lot of things. I'm definitely grateful for my family, my husband and my kids. And I'm grateful for my work. I really love what I do, and I like helping people, and I like learning and growing. So I feel grateful for those things.
That's awesome. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
And where can we find you? Social media, your website?
Yeah, I've been doing a pretty bad job on social media, I'll be honest, because I'm putting so much energy into other parts of my business. So I think go to the website, which is epicyclegroup.com.
Okay, and that'll be in below.
It'll be at the bottom, and if you want to chat and learn more, shoot me an email. I think that's a good way to go.
Great. And stay tuned because I will definitely showcase any of your workshops. I'll put them on my social media, and you'll probably see us together in the future, right?
It's true. I see it. Yep.
Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm so glad to bring you these video series. Make sure you get in touch with Sasha at epicyclegroup.com. You can find me at sipandsoma.com. I'm on Instagram. I'm on Facebook. Like me, check me out, check out, and make sure you put a review. This will be on YouTube and on Facebook. So thank you so much. And